Hey boys and girls, how's everybody doing? Hope all of you guys are doing well. Hope you guys had a good weekend. Before we get started on today's lesson, I'm going to do a little bit of a recap of what we've already learned. So remember, these are things you have got to make sure that you know. I don't usually waste your time with things that we don't need to know. You know, I could teach you guys a lot of things. I could teach you about space and planets, but that's not going to be on the EOG. So I don't really waste your time with things that I don't feel are paramount to your learning the fifth grade EOG. So these questions I'm about to ask you, you should know the answer to because I asked them quite a few times last week. So let's get our whiteboards ready, and it'll be about 5 or 6 questions, okay? So the first one is, what 2 ways can water be evaporated from the surface of the earth? What are the 2 ways? What are the 2 things that can evaporate water off the surface of the earth? Go ahead and write down your answer, children. All right, so let's go ahead and show those. You should know those like your last name by now. That would be the sun and that would be the wind. Those are the 2 things that evaporate water. And remember, the wind is made by the sun. And you guys are gonna learn that in probably about 3 weeks. So just make sure you remember that. All right, now here's the next question. When water is evaporated from earth, it is warm vapor and it goes up. What type of air causes this warm vapor to turn back into liquid water and grab dust so that a cloud can form? What type of air does this warm vapor move into? Everybody should have that right there. It has to run into cold air. Remember, we're talking about a physical change here. We're talking a vapor to a liquid again, okay? Good, if you know that one, that's a tough question. All right, what is the one precipitation that falls in the summer, but it's frozen? What is that called? You guys should get this correct. We went over it. I gave you a whole lesson on it. All right, so you should have hail. Hail is a really odd precipitation because it's frozen and it falls when it's super hot outside. Very strange indeed, if you don't mind me saying. Okay, now we know water can run off to many, many different spots. Lakes, rivers, streams, oceans, underground. Where does it run off to where it might not ever evaporate again because of the lack of sun and the wind? You guys don't say your answers out loud because some of these people don't know this stuff. Where can it go to what never be evaporated again? You should have that, sirs and gentlemen and ladies and girls, groundwater. Because remember, if it goes under the ground, you're losing the mechanism for it to evaporate, which is the sun. The sun can't penetrate the land, okay? And it can't suck the water up and wind can't get to it. So it's gonna be stuck down there for a while, maybe even forever. This is the last question I'm gonna ask you. Yes, who's got a question?
Alana.
Alana?
So, every time you say like the underground stuff and the groundwater, I always just put underground instead of groundwater.
It's fine.
Is
If
that
you
okay?
if you put that on a test, I would totally understand and I would give you credit for it, but they don't put underground water on the test. That's why I kind of put groundwater, Alana, because I kind of want you to understand it's groundwater. But if you saw that on a test, you would know. You know what I mean? So if you know it's underground, groundwater, same thing, girl. It doesn't matter. As long as you remember that it's under the ground. All right? This is the last question I'm going to ask you, and you guys have done very well. I'm very impressed by you guys. What do you call the release of water vapor from green plants, trees, and grasses? What do you call it? And Haley, you better go look again, sweet pea. It's called transpiration. Remember when trees and grasses sweat, they pull up too much water and the sun heats them up and they kind of release their water. It also gets put into the water cycle as well. But that's okay. If you did miss it, that's the toughest part. That and going from the evaporation to the condensation. Those are the two hardest parts. So y'all did really well for doing this remotely. I wish I had you face to face. Y'all would probably all know it like the back of your hand. But we're gonna start something new today. Okay, so you can put your whiteboards up and I want you guys just to listen. Okay, now, what I'm gonna talk about today is probably gonna throw you for a loop. Okay, and that's okay because some of this stuff is gonna throw you for a loop because you don't understand what's going on. But you will after I tell you. All right, so we're gonna talk about this word pressure. Now I know some of you guys have probably felt pressure before, probably from your parents. Hey, clean your room, take out the trash, go clean up the yard, and they hound you all the time about it. Didn't I tell you to dump the trash? And then all of a sudden you start getting this feeling in your head and you're like, God, I'm under so much pressure. Maybe in school too. Hey, you got, 3 pages of work done. That could be pressure as well. Well, this is how the internet defines pressure. Continuous physical force exerted on or against an object by something in contact with it. So you could put pressure on somebody's hand when you shake it. You shake somebody's hand, you grab somebody's shirt, that's pressure, right? And then the last one, the use of persuasion, influence, or intimidation to make someone do something. You guys ever had a friend that said, hey man, go into that grocery store and go in there and bother somebody. Go ahead, man, do it, go ahead. And they try to get you in trouble. Well, that's called peer pressure. And you guys are gonna probably gonna learn all that when you get into a little bit older schooling, such as 7th, 8th grade, high school. Your friends are gonna ask you to do things and you're gonna feel like you've got this pressure on you to do it, but you probably should not give in to the pressure because they're scared to do it themselves. Okay, so pressure is something that presses on you, all right? So we're gonna talk about pressure and weather today, all right? So let's go to our next slide. Now some of you guys have definitely had pressure on you, okay? How many of you guys have ever been to the pool before and swam all the way to the deep end? And you go all the way to the bottom of the pool and all of a sudden you feel like your head is getting crushed and that your ears start feeling like they're popping. You guys ever feel that before? Okay, so yeah, you get heavier. It starts squeezing on you, and that is one of the pressures that we have to deal with when we go under the water. Okay, when we go underwater, the pressure increases. That is why we know more about the surface of our moon than we do the bottom of our oceans, because we can't get to the bottom of our oceans in some spots. It's so deep that every kind of vehicle we take down there gets crushed by all the pressure. Okay, so there's a lot of pressure underwater. Now another place there's a lot of pressure, and you guys might have done this, is if you've driven up a mountain. Have you guys ever driven up a mountain? You've gone to the North Carolina mountains and all of a sudden your ears start feeling like they're popping? You guys ever done that before? Okay, some of you maybe. All right, here's another good one. If you've ever been in an airplane, okay? If you've ever been in an airplane and you take off in an airplane, all of a sudden you start feeling your ears going pop, 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 pop. And the reason that happens is because the air pressure changes, okay? Now, when we start talking about the air pressure on us from the atmosphere, we'll get more into why that happens, but you got pressure on you all the time. There's always this pressure on your body, and you're used to it. You don't feel it because it's always been here, all right? But there's 2 types of pressures in weather, and we've got to make sure we know them, all right? And I'm gonna show them to you on these slides, okay? And they're not very hard to understand, but they're definitely a little bit different. All right, so I'm gonna go to this next slide. If it goes, let's see. Uh-oh, my mouse is frozen. Uh-oh, come on.
Try your whiteboard.
I'm sorry, I was using the wrong mouse, guys. All right, there's two types of pressures, all right, and they're really easy to learn. There's a really high pressure and there's a really low pressure. Those are the only two you need to remember, all right, but they're a little bit trickier than that. Now, oops. Now, you can see on this map right here, can everybody see the map down here at the bottom? This is a map of the United States,
Yes.
obviously, and I hope that all of you know that, and I hope you all know that we live in North Carolina and we live on the coast of North Carolina. But when you look at this right here, you see some letters, and they're in red and they're in blue. All right, and you also see some funky lines. We're going to talk about those lines one day soon. We're not going to do that today because that's a little bit confusing for right now. But that is an H and an L, okay? And you can see they're spread out all through the map. Now, high pressures are generally good weather, all right? And you can see that by those H's. If you can look at those H's, you don't usually see any like green stuff or white stuff around them. That's precipitation falling from the sky. But if you look around the L's, you can start seeing some precipitation falling through them, all right? So let's go to the next slide. Oops. All right, here's another one. A bunch of L's and a bunch of H's all over the map, all right? Here's another one. A little bit nicer one. You can see there's a low right there, right near us, a couple of highs. Now, these are all old weather maps, guys. These are not from today. And here's a really good one. You can see that blue line right there with the ones with the teeth on it. That's a cold front. You can see the L right here. And you see all that precipitation around that L, and look at those two L's. And then you got H's. They those high pressures, they don't really show much. There's not a lot of weather around them. But high and low pressures dominate our weather. Now, we're getting right into the meat of hurricane season, which on September the 10th, I think, or the 11th, is going to be the peak day for hurricanes. That doesn't mean that a hurricane is going to hit that day. That just means that that's going to be the middle of hurricane season. The conditions are favorable for hurricanes to start coming, and all hurricanes that you ever see are all going to be low pressure systems, because low pressure systems are bad weather systems. High pressure is generally really nice. Like yesterday, we were under a high pressure. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. It was beautiful. So we're going to talk about these, and I'm going to talk to you about them because they're a little bit weird. All right. Now, we're going to talk about high pressures first. All right. Now I'm going to draw myself. Hope this thing works. Can everybody see those red lines? You guys can't see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
We
hold on
can see
one
it.
second.
Yes.
I tell you what, hold on one second. It'll probably be easier if I do this, because then you won't have to worry about, all right, hold on one second, guys.
We were able to see it, Mr. Allen.
I know, but I'm gonna do it in white. It'll just be easier for everybody.
Yes, sir.
Make sure you guys are on screen. Where you're just Mr. Allen's screen.
Okay. So here's my blank white piece of paper. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and draw an earth, okay, or half of an earth. Can y'all see that? Y'all can see that, can't you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It's not the straightest
Yeah,
line in the
yes.
world, but it'll do.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk
Yes.
about these lows and these highs, okay? Because they got certain characteristics that you cannot forget. I'm gonna go with an L, and I'll go with an H right here. Well, the strange, interesting thing about these two lows, I mean, this one low and this one high, is that they have a characteristic that they spin all the time. They're constantly spinning, all right? Now, both of them spin different directions. You guys make sure you wake up, pay attention. Low pressures are gonna spin counterclockwise. So that means they're gonna go against the movement of a clock. So they go counterclockwise. Okay? That's how our hurricanes spin, is they go counterclockwise. Now highs, if these go counterclockwise, which way do you think the highs are gonna go? Which way? They're gonna go around like a clock, and we call that clockwise, okay? So that's one huge difference, is they go clockwise, all right? Now, another interesting thing about lows is they have, I'm not saying this is always true, but generally lows are warm and they're wet, okay? So if you have a low over you, it's definitely gonna be wet and stormy. It sometimes can be cold, but generally they're always very, very warm systems, like hurricanes, huge
Mr. Allen,
rainstorms.
get it? Lows?
Huh? Lows.
The store lows.
Yeah, lows. You could think of it that way. So these are warm and wet. So if these are warm and wet, then high pressures are gonna be what? Dry and cool, okay? Generally. If you have a high pressure over you, you're generally not gonna have any rain. You get a low over you, and it's gonna be stormy. So if it's sunny outside, even if it's cold or hot, you're under a high pressure. If you look outside and it's stormy, there's rain, or there's massive snowstorms, you're under a low, okay? Super simple. Lows are generally very dangerous, okay? They're dangerous, they bring dangerous weather. And highs, they're very peaceful. Okay, so if you got a high pressure on you, that'd be a great day to go out on a picnic, go to the boat, go out to the pool or the beach. You don't really want to go to the beach or the pool when there's a low pressure over you. Now I'm getting ready to blow your mind, all right? So we're gonna go to the next slide. Now, I told you guys from probably the beginning of science that there's a northern hemisphere and there is a southern hemisphere, correct? Northern and a southern hemisphere, so watch this. Now I told you that the northern and the southern hemisphere are different places, all right? We're getting ready to go into the season fall, and they're getting ready to go into the season spring. They are in winter right now when we're in summer. And it all has to do with the angle of the sun. So when it's Christmas time in the southern hemisphere, they got their shorts on. Rather than us, we generally have our jeans and our sweaters on. So it's just a different place, and this is also a different part as well. So in the northern hemisphere, so this is the northern, okay? We just talked about lows spin counterclockwise, okay? And highs spin which way? Clockwise. Well, when you go below the equator, I told you guys this the first day, I think, everything's the opposite down there, okay, as far as weather goes. So when you have a low down in the southern hemisphere, which here's the southern, okay, lows aren't going to spin counterclockwise. Which way are they going to go? They go clockwise. Still the same type of weather. They don't change the type of weather. They just change the way they spin. So high pressures down in the southern hemisphere, they don't go clockwise, they go counterclockwise. And I know that's a little confusing, and don't get confused by the fact that they spin differently or that they always deliver the same kind of weather, because a low pressure in the southern hemisphere is going to deliver the same exact type of weather a low in the northern hemisphere is going to deliver. Highs in both the northern and the southern hemisphere is going to be good weather. Their spins just change, and it has to do with the rotation of the earth, and it also has to do with this incredibly cool line, the what? What do we call that line in the middle of the world?
Equator.
The equator, okay? The equator's kind of a cool place. The equator's kind of a volatile place, actually. There's a lot of wind, and things change as soon as you go past that equator, okay? Now, I know this is kind of probably throwing you for a loop, because this is probably what you weren't expecting to learn, but we've got to understand lows and highs and the way they spin before we can move on to hurricanes. Because I got a feeling a hurricane is going to start popping up again within the next few weeks. There's going to be a hurricane. So we're going to learn everything we can about a hurricane, how destructive they are, the levels at which they strike, all that stuff. You guys are going to be hurricane experts, so that when they come on and talk about it on the Weather Channel, you'll understand everything they're saying. Because I want y'all to have that level of comprehension, okay? So just remember that, and remember, you can always go back and freeze the screen, because I'm going to definitely ask you a question about northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere lows and highs, okay? And listen, this is the first day of this. Don't beat yourself up. If you don't get them right, it's okay. We'll move on to the next day, okay? Don't put yourself under so much pressure. I mean, how funny
That was
am
a
I?
good one.
Yeah, thanks
That
a
was
lot,
a good
Jade. I
one.
think you're the only one
was
that got
actually
it.
pretty fun. That was pretty funny.
Don't put yourself under so much pressure, guys. And if you go under pressure, go under a high pressure. Be cool, all right? Be cool and dry. Don't get all wet and warm.
Okay, stop making funny jokes.
All right, so does anybody have a question about this stuff?
Exactly.
Anybody got a question? No questions at all? And you guys are so smart. What about you, Evan Todd? You got a question, buddy?
No, just
Okay, bud, I thought you did. Anybody else? Gage, what's up?
I never thought science would be so.
So what?
So funny.
So funny. Well, I'm a funny guy, buddy. I try to make it fun for you. I know this stuff is tough to learn. Faith, you got a question? Faith, you're undecipherable right now. I cannot understand anything you're saying. Anybody else got a question? Faith, your speakers aren't working. Jameer, what's your question, bud?
my question was for Miss Moore.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end my lesson, okay? Miss Moore, Jameer's got a question for you. I guess she's still listening. I'm not sure. Yeah, there she is. I'll have a Google Doc up for you in just a minute, so just be patient. It's going to take me a minute to upload this video, okay? Hope you guys have a good day, though, and I'll talk to you soon.